Hi, I'm Merav Oren, and I'm happy to host you on my podcast, What's Your Foodish, where I meet the most interesting people to talk about their home, their childhood, family, and memories from the dinner table. And today, in this new episode, I'm happy to host Professor Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett. Barbara is an extraordinary, multidisciplinary personality, an amazing woman that before I say a word about her career and what she has done, I want to say that when I'm her age, I want to look like her, but more than that, I want her energy. Barbara is a university professor Emerita at NYU and the chief curator of the core exhibition and advisor to the director of the Poland Museum in Warsaw. She was awarded and honored for so many achievements, and she's best known for her interdisciplinary contributions to Jewish studies and to the theory and history of museums, tourism, and heritage. She has published widely on the history of Jewish cookbooks, served on many boards, and her collection of Jewish cookbooks is one of the largest in the private hands. We are also so proud and lucky to have her as a member on our advisory board. So Barbara, I feel privileged and I'm happy that you are my guest today.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being me. And Yala, let's start. And let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Tell me a few words about that.
Yes, so I was born during the war. I was born in 1942 in Toronto, Canada, and I grew up in an Jewish immigrant neighborhood in downtown Toronto. My parents were born and raised in Poland, and my mother came to Canada in 1929, and my father in 1934.
And brothers, sisters, have everybody lived where since then?
So I'm the oldest of three girls. I have two younger sisters. My youngest sister unfortunately passed away when she was in her 40s. And we grew up in this immigrant neighborhood, and then eventually we moved to the suburbs in Toronto.
So tell me, what does the word home mean to you?
I think pretty much home is when I'm with my family, and my family. I'm the only one who left Toronto, so home means being with my family in the place where I grew up.
And what's your earliest memory related to food and home?
Well, my mother was a good cook, but not a passionate cook. In other words, cooking was not something she looked forward to doing and wanted to do, but she was actually a good cook, and she was health conscious, but also she had a full repertoire of all kinds of dishes that she knew from her childhood. So I definitely grew up with, the whole range of what you would expect of chicken soup and gefilte fish and helzel and eilich and fisalach and just the regular tzimmus and the rest. But I think probably holidays at my grandmother's were the most memorable. My father's mother, the whole family would gather. My father's the oldest of four boys, and so he, his brothers, their wives, their kids, my first cousins would gather at my grandmother's, and she was a wonderful cook and completely traditional. So for Passover, for Rosh Hashanah, and those were really wonderful occasions.
Can you tell me a bit about your cookbook collection? How did it all start?
Well, the way it started, I was just very, very interested in food and cooking as a child. And I remember when we were living downtown in this immigrant neighborhood, the very first thing that I ever cooked, and I think probably for most kids it is, was scrambled eggs. That was the absolutely first. That was the first thing. I don't know quite how it came about or why I was allowed to, but I couldn't have been more than 10 years old, probably even younger. So that's the very, very, very first thing. However, I went to a public school in this immigrant neighborhood, and we had a choice. We had a choice. We could either do, the boys did manual training and the girls did home economics. There actually wasn't a choice.
It's amazing. It's everywhere the same. They send the boys to that and the girls to the kitchen.
Yeah, but interesting. I think if I'd had a choice, I probably would have done manual training. I would have loved to have done carpentry, to know how to do all those things. But in any event, we had home economics. And, if you were to see photographs from the time, it was classic. It was little gas burners, like 2 rows of them, enough for each child to have a gas burner. And home economics meant you learned to sew, you learned to cook, and you learned all the basic skills you needed for homemaking. So, washing, starching, ironing, etc. And our first sewing tasks were an apron, a white bib apron, and a little white peaked kind of cap that you would, wear around your head. I assume it's to keep your hair away from everything, and a little bag to carry it in, monogrammed, where you embroidered your initials. So I already had the outfit for home economics, and also, of course, we learned cooking, and I would say probably the first actual cookbook was the textbook for my home economics class, which I still own. I still own
Wow.
the cookbook from that home economics. It was how to set a table, and then nutrition, and of course, it was very much Canadian, which means really Anglo-Canadian cuisine. So, how to boil an egg, and how to make a white sauce, and how to make, baking powder biscuits, and, things like that. But what I do remember is that when it was going to be a meat dish, the Jewish kids, their mothers would send them to the home economic class with kosher meat. If you can
Wow.
imagine, we would bring
No,
kosher
amazing.
meat to this home economics class in this public school. So that would be the first. That would be the first thing. And I loved home economics. I loved sewing. I loved cooking. And it was an immigrant neighborhood, so there were night classes for immigrants. And I remember that my father and I would go to these night classes, and that I actually took sewing in the night class, and made myself a reversible vest, press
Mhm.
pleated skirt. And I mean, at that point, I'm like 10, 11, 12 years old. Now, the second critical element was that I took piano lessons, and my piano teacher's husband was an avid gardener, and he subscribed to a magazine called Better Homes and Gardens. And when I would be waiting for my piano lesson, my piano teacher let me go down into the basement of their house. And in the basement were stacks and stacks and stacks of Better Homes and Gardens. Clearly, he had already read them, and he didn't throw them away. They were just lying there. Now, in Better Homes and Gardens, my great discovery were the advertisements for food, because these advertisements included coupons that you could then send
Mm.
to the company and get a free cookbook. So obviously it was for Gold Medal flour, or for Wesson oil, or
Yeah.
for some other Heinz product. And I loved getting mail. So it was one of several tactics that I had for getting mail. And I collected, and now actually these product cookbooks are they're very ephemeral and really, really valuable. So my actual collecting, not the first cookbook that I owned, but the collecting really began with free product cookbooks that I sent away for. And I clipped all his magazines. I don't know that he ever went down and discovered all these, pages that had
Yeah.
the coupons, clipped out of them. But that's really how the collecting began.
Wow, what a story. I'm shocked. You threw me back to my childhood. Speaking about the home economics here in Israel, we had also exactly the same. And in our class, I went, of course, to cooking class over there. Not of course, but this is what we had. And my first meringue I studied to do was there. And I remember all those years, because here it's called kisses. I don't know how you call it over there. It's like those white meringues in the
Yeah.
shape of a kiss. And that's the first thing I ever made in high school, in school, not high school.
Oh no, that's actually sophisticated. And I actually uh, uh, had the option. We had options in high school of electives, and those were, you could take art, manual
Mhm.
training, home economics, or typing. Well, typing was out of the question because I was convinced I'd end up as a secretary. So I didn't take typing. Manual training wasn't actually really an option. That was only for the boys.
Yeah.
and I wasn't really interested in painting. But I loved home economics. I took home economics all the way through high school, and I actually was planning to major in home economics at university. And my father, who was very patient, he said, "Are you sure? Is that really what you want to do?" Although he would have been okay with it if it was what I really wanted to do. And I did really want to do it, except that what I discovered is that home economics at the university level was in fact science. It was food science, it was
Mm.
textile science. It wasn't cooking. It was something else altogether. And when I realized that this was not going to be, the Culinary Institute of America, and I was not going to be cooking, then I decided,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to major in home economics.
Going back to your cookbook collection, do you have any favorites, or what's your rarest book you have, except for the one you took from your home economics, of course?
Well, the cookbooks that I am really most connected, attached to, are the ones in Yiddish. So that would be those would be my most favorite are my Yiddish cookbooks. But uh, I have I have some very precious ones. Some of the early editions of some of the earliest Jewish cookbooks published in Europe in the 19th century, Rebecca Wolf,
Mm.
and there are various other ones. But I would say really it's my Yiddish cookbooks that are my most precious.
I read that you lived in Israel for 2 years, long, long time ago,
Oh,
and I
yes, I
wanted
spent a year in Israel. I did
in a
indeed.
kibbutz, and I said in Revivim. I know that kibbutz. I lived there for a few months as well. Amazing, down south. I wanted to ask what or if did you take with you from here that you can say like shaped your Jewish identity, or how did it influence you?
Well, it was a wonderful year. It was, I think I was 18 that year, and actually, my plan, I knew that after high school, and we had it's Canadian high school, so we had 5 years at the time. It's no longer the case, but at the time it was 5 years of high school, not four. So and I decided after high school I didn't want to go straight to university. It was a very rewarding year, and I think what I most value about the year was to have been in Israel in 1960-61, which was such a different time from the Israel of today. And it was, I would say, very austere, and a kind of simplicity. When I think about the conditions, I have relatives cooking on a primus, and um, it was an extraordinary moment. The country, was approaching its bar mitzvah year. It was really a very, very special period, and that's what I think I most value.
You know what? So I would ask also, like regarding the food. Speaking of cooking on Primus and stuff like that, do you think you took anything from here that you took with you?
Well, not
Different than
really. No, I
Ashkenazi
mean,
basic food,
I
I
think
would
what would be
mean.
most memorable really was street food, because I don't. Yeah, absolutely. And
Really, those days,
like falafel, absolutely.
or like
So
falafel?
that was memorable. I remember there was one restaurant that was essentially catering to German Jews. So it was schnitzel and much more of a kind of German Jewish cuisine. I don't remember Polish Jewish cuisine at all. And I don't remember really eating in restaurants except this one, which was kind of a lunchtime place. So for me, the markets were wonderful. Essentially for fresh produce. And then I did travel in the Galilee, and I remember being hosted by a Palestinian family, and I remember staying overnight there. And then as I was, getting ready the next day to continue traveling, that the mother prepared food for me, and it was a wonderful, enormous flatbread, cooked on a dome, and then she filled it with a hard-boiled egg, and I don't know what else,
Mm.
and then made it like a little burrito and gave it to me to take on my way. And
Mm.
but other than that, I don't. Food was not particularly memorable, to be honest.
Interesting. I was wondering if, like, everybody's talking about the beginning of Israel, like neighbors and living in Bat Yam. That I'm sure that different different cuisines or different kitchens of the neighbors probably, and usually people were living very openly and very exchanging. I don't know if the word would be recipes because it wasn't about recipes, but everybody was cooking all day and not all day, but cooking lunch for the kids and so on. And I know that a lot of people here that grew up in those days learned, like, if you talk to Asaf Ganit, that he talks about his grandmother that made couscous, not because she brought it from
Oh
Poland,
no,
because
but
her neighbors made it.
I wasn't living in a family. No, after 2 weeks, I was out of there.
Ah, you weren't staying with your relatives long?
Oh, absolutely. I got on the back of a motorcycle with a photographer, and I was out of there. I actually apprenticed to a ceramist, to Nehemiah Aziz,
Mm.
and was doing production ceramics for him, and in a basement under the central bus station, because that's where all the street food was. And actually, I was sleeping there in that ceramics workshop under the central bus station.
Ooh, okay.
So it wasn't cooking for myself. I
Yeah,
wasn't living with a family. I wasn't in a
yeah.
neighborhood.
Totally different experience. Okay, yeah. So, if I would ask, who would you most like to have dinner with? Who would it be and why? And of course, it can be anybody with us or without, or and anybody you know personally or you don't.
Oh, who would I like to have? Oh, probably, let's see, who would I like to have? Well, on my list would be Grace Young
Hmm.
and Alice Waters. Those would be the two. Those would be the two people I would love to have dinner with.
And why?
Grace Young is a wonderful Chinese American cookbook author, and also a very very dear friend. And the sort of the cuisine that she represents, she's done three really fabulous cookbooks, is a kind of a universe, a world, that it's a cuisine that I love, and her relationship to it is very special. And I feel that to have dinner with Grace would be an adventure. With Alice Waters, I think she's such a pioneering figure and has such an extraordinary relationship with food at its source and at its essence. And she's such a visionary in the way in which she has worked to transform the way Americans eat, but especially kids, and her school gardens. And I just think that it would be fascinating. I think whenever I'm in Berkeley, I go to Chez Panisse and always love my evenings there. And I think that that would be, she'd be the other person.
And on the other hand, who would you like to cook a meal for? What would you make and why? So,
Well, I actually it's become something of a tradition that in December I make a birthday dinner for three people who all have their birthdays in December. And it's my husband, Max, and it's Jeffrey Chandler, who is a former student of mine, and Aviva Weintraub's husband, Gordon Tapper. And Aviva is also a former student of mine, but of course, they were students so many years ago that they are now senior, distinguished, professor, curators in their own right. And I quite like that they bring with them certain food restrictions. I actually particularly like cooking dinner for people with food restrictions. That is my
you
specialty.
like that?
I love doing that. That is my specialty. And I like doing it for two reasons. One, because I like the challenge, and two, because I I like the idea of creating beautiful meals for people who can't eat everything. So that's what I would that would be my starting point.
It's very special and very thoughtful. I really love
Well,
what you said.
I once met a very distinguished scholar who had suffered some kind of I don't know, trauma, and who had lost his sense of taste. And what that really means actually was, it wasn't that he'd lost his sense of taste, he'd lost his sense of smell. And having lost his sense of smell, then the only thing he could taste are basically sweet, sour, bitter, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and I assume umami, if you consider that a fifth taste, which is to say, those are sensations that are not controlled by aroma, by smell. And he said that as a result, he had lost all interest in eating and he had lost a lot of weight, and that the only thing that gave him any pleasure was smoking. And I said to him, "Give me the opportunity," which he never did. I said, "Give me the opportunity. I promise you that I will make a meal that you will enjoy, even though you will not have a sense of smell." So I had already planned what I would do, but I never had that opportunity. But I did have an opportunity to prepare a meal for a very dear friend who was dying of pancreatic cancer and
Mm.
who could not eat anything that was not pureed. And I made a meal for her and her husband, me and my husband, and we all ate the same thing. And I prepared a complete meal that all of us ate that she could eat. So that would have been, I think, the most extreme, almost the most extreme case. But that is, um, that's
That
what I
is
most
so
like to do.
beautiful. So beautiful and so touching. Wow. So to sum our things up, I have like these 9 questions that I call them the quick questionnaire. It's just a yes or no questions or something like that. So let's just dive into them.
Okay.
Coriander or parsley?
Oh gosh. Okay, parsley.
Okay, why gosh, it's you like both?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, it's not of course. Coriander, most of the people either love it or hate it. It's
Well,
a
because
very
it's actually, it's actually genetic. I mean, it's for some they actually experience it as soapy. I mean that is a genetic issue.
yeah. Sweet or spicy?
Oh, I hate sweet spice. Oh, and no, I'm not crazy about either, to tell you the truth.
Okay, salad or steak?
Both.
Both. Okay. Sharing or individual dishes?
Sharing.
Now, I have a question. I'm not sure how to say it in English, but in Hebrew, you would say, like, keep straightening the line of the cake or stop at a slice. Because you know how you, like, nibble on the. How would
I'm
you
not a
say it?
cake. I'm not a cake person.
Mm. And if it was a pie, would you stop
I'm
at a
not a
slice
pie.
or
I'm not a pie person either.
Okay, next one. Breakfast or dinner?
Dinner.
Over the counter or at the table?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe over the counter.
Okay, start the meal with salads or soup?
Salad.
Salad. And the last one you answered me because it's challah or sourdough bread, so we're
It's always
definitely just out
sourdough.
there. Yeah. So I want to say a huge thank you for being with me today. It was really a pleasure. Very
Oh, my,
interesting.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
And for you that are listening to us, please join us for our next episodes of What's Your Foodish. And thank you again for your
Okay.
time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.